Nyaje Chembo to Nimi Jan, Donan Manum Chembo, Nagada, Bankara Dargam Santo, Sherman, Tumba to Jejan Laki Shom Sir. Nation Roar Zerni Jangamsa, and Jawar to Gyptian Yelaman, Jimmy Banzoja, Soran. Gonjo Tobam for a Shinjilo, Gonjo Tobam for a Shinjilo, Gonjo Tobam for a Shinjilo.
Profound and subtle Dharma is rarely encountered in eons. Now we hear and follow it. May we realize the Tathagata's meaning. To liberate beings, please generate bodhicitta before teaching. Next, we'll discuss the Shurangama Sutra. In the Shurangama Sutra now, previously, Ananda has received the Buddha's rebuke. The reasoning you speak of is unreasonable. How could this be one's own mind? Because he previously spoke about what we are currently seeking and examining, or the mind that exhaustively searches for everything, should be one's own mind. At this moment, the Buddha began to rebuke him. Next, it was discussed that our discriminating thoughts of external phenomena have actually confused our true nature. From beginningless time until now, like thieves being treated as one's own children. For this reason we have lost our true mind, and thus become subject to wandering in samsara. Previously such reasoning was explained. Next, continuing the teaching, Ananda addressed the Buddha, "World-honored one, because I am the Buddha's especially beloved brother, my mind also especially loves the Buddha." Here this love means having great faith in the Buddha, because previously he also saw the Buddha with great joy and affection. Why did he like him? Because he was very majestic. He loved the Buddha, not the Buddha's mind, but the Buddha's excellent appearance and majesty, perhaps because the Buddha was also his relative and for various other reasons. In any case, he loved and liked the Buddha, so this later led me to ordain. Ananda said, "Because I love, so love is very important. Below this must still be discussed because it's about mind. Then my mind not only serves the Tathagata alone, but even throughout lands numerous as Ganges sands, all Buddhas and some spiritual teachers, I would still serve. Not only before Shakyamuni Buddha would I serve with special respect, not only this, but even in the world before countless Tathagatas, I would also make offerings and serve. And besides the Tathagatas, before other spiritual teachers, I would be the same, making offerings, serving, respecting, and prostrating." Moreover, for such service and prostration, he would generate great and courageous mind. Generating such great mind, and he performs all difficult practices. On the Bodhi path, these difficult practices, including when serving the Tathagata, surely would not be simple. Serving spiritual teachers is also not simple. So accomplishing the difficult to accomplish, extremely difficult matters, I would practice all of these. In this way, whether I serve the Tathagata or serve spiritual teachers or love the Buddha, all of these use this mind. The Buddha says there is no such mind, but without this mind, how could this be explained? Because the mind I use to serve all these is actually this mind. At this point, Chang Shui also quoted a scriptural citation from the Nirvana Sutra. The Nirvana Sutra states, "This bodhicitta is truly not Buddha nature." What does this mean? Generating bodhicitta is actually not Buddha nature. Our Buddha nature should be the primary cause. Just now, Ananda said, whether I love the Buddha, serve the Tathagata or spiritual teachers, all these good virtuous minds completely rely on this mind. If this mind did not exist, my service to the Tathagata and generating bodhicitta would all be impossible to accomplish. There's another matter, even slandering the Dharma. This doesn't refer only to Ananda. Actually, there are many people in the world who slander the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Slander cause and effect, slander virtuous dharmas. Slandering virtuous dharmas also relies on this mind, and permanently abandoning good roots. The Akantikas we discussed before, meaning beings who have severed good roots, severing good roots, permanently abandoning good roots, permanently severing good roots. Such Akantika beings also depend on this mind, also rely on this mind. In this way, on the positive side, serving the Tathagata can only be accomplished with mind. On the negative side, severing good roots, generating wrong views, and slandering the Dharma, many evil karmas, also depend on this mind. In this way, if this which can clearly manifest, if it is not mind, if that which can clearly accomplish both good and evil with perfect clarity, if this is not mind, then I would have no mind. In that case, what would I become? Like earth and wood without any consciousness. This way would be especially frightening, he felt. In this case, who would generate bodhicitta? Who would liberate sentient beings? Who would do good deeds? This world would be very frightening. Actually, there's a treatise on no mind by Patriarch Bodhidharma. I remember there are about a dozen questions. One of the questions is, if we have no mind, how can we understand the true nature of all phenomena? At that time, some analogies were used. For example, though the celestial drum has no mind, it can transmit the Tathagata's teachings. Though the wish-fulfilling jewel has no mind, it can fulfill sentient beings' wishes. So sometimes having no mind is not necessarily particularly bad. But the other party was already especially afraid. If this were the case, we would all become mindless. Apart from this awareness, there is nothing else. If we were separated from such awareness, this clear awareness, then besides this, there would be nothing else. Why does the Tathagata say this is not mind? In this way, why does the Buddha say this mind is not mind, not this mind? In this way, I am truly terrified, I am very afraid. Of course, Venerable Ananda is manifesting here, being extremely terrified, very nervous, very afraid. Of course, some commentaries say Ananda should be manifesting fear. Actually, he knows that having no mind would not lead to nihilism, but because he represented many beings of the substantialist schools and some Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, as well as other ordinary worldly beings. In this way, in different situations, he manifested different questions. In this way, actually, Ananda skillfully understood the Buddha's intention, what the Buddha would answer next, what he needed to ask. Moreover, he evoked some doubts in sentient beings and elicited certain mental states in beings. He felt that among our sentient beings, certainly many people cannot accept the teachings on emptiness. So if there were no mind at all, that would be too frightening. Good has good retribution. Evil has evil retribution. Everything would completely vanish into nothingness. In that case, what would we do? Many would have such fears. So he said, I am also very afraid. Together with this great assembly, all have doubts. All of us in this great assembly, if the Buddha says there is no mind, wouldn't this become a view of nihilistic emptiness? If it became nihilistic emptiness, actually everyone would be especially afraid. Some commentaries explain that Bodhi is originally unattainable, but here many beings of substantialist schools cannot accept this. Therefore, they appear especially fearful. Then Ananda continued, "Please, Buddha of great compassion, please have compassion for us and give us teachings to eliminate the ignorance and delusion of us sentient beings. Unawakened, we sentient beings are very ignorant and confused. If this is the case, we cannot understand some truly profound dharmas." In the Mahaparinirvana Sutra, there are some principles. If one can accept the Mahayana teachings on emptiness, it's like wonderful medicine that can be digested. If one cannot accept it, then it's like poison, especially frightening. The Vaipulya teachings are likewise. For the wise, they become amrita. The foolish, not knowing Buddha nature, find them poisonous when taken. The principles of these Mahayana Vaipulya teachings, if one is wise, one completely understands their profound meaning. The principles of emptiness and luminosity, all these are known. But the foolish, not knowing that every sentient being possesses Buddha nature, Tathagatagarbha, for this reason, many foolish people, when they partake of such teachings that are like Amrita, originally Amrita, they instead become poison, especially frightening. Among Mahayana practitioners, some are also hearing emptiness teachings for the first time, or have never heard them before. Now hearing them, some find them difficult to accept. For this reason, Ananda again requested the Buddha to teach us, if there is no mind, it's still very frightening. Specifically, what should we do? He explains this principle below. At this time, the Buddha, then the world-honored one, taught Ananda. At this time, the Buddha taught Ananda and the Great Assembly. What was the main purpose of this teaching? Wishing to cause their minds to enter the patience of non-arising dharmas. The Buddha wanted to teach to let them, mainly wanting to say that Venerable Ananda and all other sentient beings should attain the patience of non-arising dharmas. The meaning of the patience of non-arising dharmas. In the Maharatnakuta Sutra, there's a teaching that says, the patience of non-arising dharmas is the patience that all dharmas are non-arising and non-ceasing. The patience of non-arising dharmas means patiently accepting that all dharmas are non-arising and non-ceasing. Originally, all dharmas are non-arising, non-ceasing, and empty. If we can patiently accept that all dharmas are non-arising and non-ceasing, we can accept and realize this ourselves. Actually, in the Mahaprajnaparamita Shastra, there's a similar teaching. The patience of non-arising dharmas is having faith realization and unobstructed non-regression in the true nature of non-arising, non-ceasing dharmas. The Maharatnakuta Sutra and Mahaprajnaparamita Shastra have slight differences. The meaning is that originally dharmas are non-arising and non-ceasing. Not only do I realize this, but in this state one doesn't easily regress, because some practitioners cannot endure this. Like before, when two monks came to Atisha, when he first taught about selflessness of persons, they were very joyful. Finally, when he taught about selflessness of dharmas and prajna emptiness, they covered their ears and ran away. Later, Atisha also said, having only pure precepts and conduct is not enough. One must realize the teachings of Mahayana Buddhism, otherwise nothing can be accomplished. At that time he expressed great regret, speaking with great sadness and lament. So patience with dharmas is also very important. Here, for these beings to attain patience with dharmas, actually, regarding patience with dharmas, Jiaoguang's commentary states, we also discussed before, the Shurangama Sutra is about attaining a firm mind. If here the beings truly attain the state of non-arising and non-ceasing, then they truly attain a firm mind. So teaching the Shurangama Sutra enables beings to truly attain a firm mind. With this purpose, here the Buddha begins to prepare for Ananda and these beings primarily to turn the very profound wheel of emptiness Dharma. On the lion seat, he touched Ananda's head and spoke to him. The Buddha, while sitting on the lion seat, because on the lion seat there is no fear, sitting on the lion seat, generally Dharma seats are lion seats, are all the lion's roar of Mahayana emptiness Dharma that can shake all herds of beasts with wrong views. So he sat on this lion seat and first touched Ananda's head. Why touch his head? On one hand, the Dharma of non-arising and non-ceasing is very profound, so he was also comforting Ananda. Touching his head was giving him consolation, while criticizing him, also giving him some sweetness, because just before he had rebuked, "You fool, you don't even understand this," and began scolding him. Then below, if it continued completely like this, some with weaker minds might not study anymore or might have such reactions. So while also touching his head, many years ago, some had unreasonable criticisms of head touching in Tibetan Buddhism. Later, I wrote some principles in clearing doubts about Tantra. In the Buddhist sutras, there are some cases of head touching. Actually, when the Buddha was in the world, such blessings of head touching should have existed. At that time, he saw that in front of such a great assembly, he had also rebuked quite severely. In this way, fearing that Ananda might run away, on one hand comforting him, patting his head, on the other hand letting him not be so sad. What would be taught to him below? Very profound Dharma instructions. These profound Dharma instructions are actually quite similar to some direct pointings in our Tantra, but somewhat difficult to understand, although not as difficult as the 7 locations of investigating the mind. In some places you might also need to be a bit more alert, a bit more focused. Otherwise, some places might also be a little bit difficult. Not that difficult to understand, right? How does the Buddha teach below? He spoke thus to Ananda and other beings. The Tathagata constantly says, all dharmas that arise are manifested by mind alone. The Tathagata frequently teaches in different sutras that the arising of all phenomena depends on mind for their manifestation. All causes and effects, worlds and particles, all have this mind as their essence. This means that all causes and effects, this container world, from vast macroscopic worlds to minute particles, all these worlds, great and small, what is truly the root of their manifestation? It is this mind of ours. All phenomena are created by mind alone. They have this mind as their essence. Here, generally speaking, some views of the consciousness-only school hold that all phenomena are manifested by mind. Actually saying this, at first one might think, how could all phenomena be manifested by mind? Actually, this principle is quite easy if you study some consciousness-only or parts of the Dzogchen Tantras. It's quite accessible because every world we experience is actually related to each person's mind. Whether this world is beautiful or ugly, joyful or painful, it's actually related to his mind. Once a person's mind has disappeared, this world also disappears before him. So our world should be related to each sentient being's mind. Some are related to beings' collective mind, related to collective karma. Some are individual, personal minds that still have certain relationships. So here, first it was mentioned that when comforting Ananda, he generally explained that all phenomena of causes and effects have a close relationship with mind. Furthermore, he said, Ananda, if all existence in this world, even a single blade of grass, a single leaf, a thread, a knot, thread and knot here actually mean a single strand, a single fiber. We often say a thread of hemp, very subtle, extremely minute dharmas, whether a blade of grass, a tree, a leaf, or even a particle. The slightest bit, these dharmas, if you investigate their root origin or trace their source, seeking their origin, all have essential nature. When searching in this way, every dharma has its essential nature. First, from the perspective of the external, inanimate dharmas of the container world, the entire world or each blade of grass and tree within it, it seems even the tiniest particle has its own essential nature, its own essence. Even space, which we discuss, space in the world has nothing at all, but actually space has its name and its own appearance, or an unobstructed state of function. Even this space has an essential nature, its essence. It's just somewhat different from form and conditioned dharmas. It has its own unobstructed, yes, it should be an unconditioned dharma. It has its own essential nature. How much more so the pure, wondrous, luminous mind that pervades all minds? How could it be without essence? How much more so our pure, subtle, luminous mind? This mind is actually the mind that pervades all, this mind that pervades all. How could it be without essence? It should have one. So here the Buddha's meaning in speaking to Ananda, my meaning is not that everything has no essence or that mind has no essence. That's not what I mean. Look, every blade of grass and tree in the world conventionally has its essence. Mind is the same way. Even worldly space has its own essence. How much more so the one we sentient beings possess in our continuum, without any defilement, extremely pure, wondrous here, meaning subtle, extremely rare, luminous, meaning both pure and bright. Such a mind, pervading all means, it encompasses everything. It pervades all essential natures. How could such a mind be without essence? This passage seems clearer in Tibetan. It means all phenomena have their own essence. How much more so this luminous, rare mind that manifests everything? How could it be without essence? In Tibetan, this is even more clear at a glance. But regardless, the meaning is that all phenomena have their form. In that case, whether we sentient beings become enlightened or fall into samsara, all of this, however great, however rare this mind, it's impossible for it to have no essence at all. It should have its own essence. It's just that this kind of essence, can we sentient beings recognize it? At first he explained such a general comfort. According to Jiao Guang and some commentaries, this passage connects with what's above and below. First comforting Ananda. What I said yesterday doesn't mean mind has no essence. Actually, mind still has essence. It's just that this essence's mode of existence is somewhat different. Below, this is explained. Then below, he begins further what should be considered a kind of direct pointing, first saying, if you cling to discriminating contemplation as the nature of knowing, insisting it must be mind, the Buddha said to Ananda, didn't you say yesterday? That which can infer, exhaust everything, that which can observe, this mind, that which can grasp, cling to, and discriminate, such contemplation that can clearly contemplate everything, the nature of what is known. Didn't you say this is such a mind? Yesterday I asked you what mind is like. O that which can discriminate, that which can grasp, that which can ponder, that which can seek, that which can infer, such a thing is our mind. Didn't you say this yesterday? If this is the case, then below we'll speak in the Madhyamaka way, pointing out your logical flaws. Or if this is the case, you should have an answer to the following principle. What kind of answer? This mind should then be separate from all forms, sense, tastes, tangibles, and other sense objects, having a complete nature apart from them. You say your kind of mind, clear, inferential, if such a mind exists, when your mind is separated from form, separated from scent, separated from taste, separated from touch. Here he mentions 4 sense objects, sound and mental objects. These two aren't mentioned, but these two will be discussed below. So here 4 sense objects are mentioned. When separated from these 4 sense objects, if you claim to be such a discriminating mind, then when these 4 types of objects are all separated, having a complete nature apart, then another mind, its own essence, should exist. Shouldn't it? Didn't you say mind is that which can discriminate external objects? In that case, separated from these 4 sense objects, or as discussed below, plus 2 more sense objects, these 6 sense objects, after all sense objects are separated, a complete or clearly evident essence. Should this exist, such a thing, as you are now? If you acknowledge this, what's the fault? You're listening to my Dharma today, right? Ananda, aren't you now listening to me, Tathagata Shakyamuni Buddha's Dharma? In that case, at that time, your faculties interact with sound objects. Sound is a sense object. Sound functions, then discriminates. When you're listening to my Dharma, you use sound objects to function and discriminate about me. Oh, the Tathagata speaks very well, and so forth. When you look at the Tathagata, form objects should function and then discriminate. If the Tathagata has wonderful fragrances at that time, then taste objects or scent objects, scent and taste objects can also function. In this way, if all seeing, hearing, feeling, and knowing were extinguished, if extinguished, my voice also stopped, my form wasn't manifesting at that time, and taste and scent weren't present, internally maintaining tranquil solitude. Internally maintaining tranquil solitude means when the external 5 sense objects aren't there, your mind internally remains inside, your discriminating mind inside. Inside, what does this become? It would still be shadowy discriminations of mental objects. At that time, it should be equivalent to, in Tibetan, it's also equivalent to shadowy discriminations of mental objects. It's not a real thing. You know mental objects. The object of our consciousness is Dharma Dhatu. Form, sound, scent, taste, touch, Dharma Dhatu. This Dharma Dhatu. This Dharma Dhatu is equivalent to an object. When this object appears before discriminating thoughts, it's merely a reflection, like a reflection in a mirror, just an appearance. In this way, this principle is quite clear, isn't it? When all seeing, hearing, feeling, and knowing before your 5 sense consciousnesses are completely extinguished, your mind begins to withdraw inward. Sometimes when we retreat or when we rest in meditation, there's a continuous internal concentration. When concentrating internally, if your mind is thinking this and that at that time, it's actually a reflection of mental objects before consciousness. This is not ultimate. So here we want to discuss true mind. When discussing true mind, the true mind, the Buddha directly pointed out to Ananda, is actually not the 5 sense consciousnesses, or including the 6th consciousness, and below that the 7th consciousness, manas, the afflicted consciousness. This is also not our true mind. What is the true mind? It's the unconditioned Dharma, what we originally possess. This is the true mind. So what is being discussed here? All are false minds. What appears before the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body are all false appearances, false aspects. What appears before consciousness is also false. After consciousness discriminates further, this is mine, this is that, such afflicted consciousness is also false. Then when you contemplate internally and have a kind of clear aspect, this is alaya or alaya consciousness, also false aspects belonging to false aspects. What's at its deeper level? At its deeper level is our true Tathagatagarbha, our original face. But this point is very difficult to recognize with external discriminating mind. So in our tantric teachings, we often say, when recognizing awareness, the awareness we recognize should be recognized in the manner of unconditioned dharmas, not conditioned dharmas. Conditioned dharmas arise and cease. If they arise and cease, they cannot give rise to the patience of non-arising dharmas. Didn't we just discuss this? What is the patience of non-arising dharmas? The patience of non-arising dharmas is a state of non-arising and non-ceasing. The state of non-arising and non-ceasing, everything currently related to false aspects is actually not non-arising and non-ceasing. Look, just now, Ananda listened to the Tathagata's Dharma sound. When listening to the Tathagata's Dharma sound, because he relied on sound objects, the Tathagata's voice arose. Then Ananda thought, what point is the Tathagata discussing now? What is he teaching? After the Tathagata finished speaking, his sound object was no longer there. Without the sound object, the discriminating thought grasping it was gone. Without the discriminating thought grasping it, then true mind was there before. Now it's not. If it's as Ananda thought, this discriminating thought grasping, that won't work. So in Tantra we say, while grasping, the grasping mind is not it. While resting, the resting one is not it. But within there is something pure, ever-present, naked. Today, for those without tantric empowerments, I can't speak too much about this. Speaking too deeply would be a bit, they also wouldn't understand. It's fine. Understanding is also very good. The Tathagata also taught those without empowerments. Ananda didn't have empowerments either, yet such deep teachings were given. Everyone should look carefully at this passage. If you contemplate it well, actually, in your own practice, it should be very helpful for recognizing your own mind. I see many great masters. Don't explain this particularly carefully. Here they directly pass over it. Actually, this place should be combined with one's own practice, one's own recognized awareness. Combined together, there should be much benefit. Perhaps even some principles not discussed in Tantra are explained quite clearly here. Look at what was just discussed, and those related to the six sense objects arise and cease. They are not true mind. What's discussed here is true mind. What we often call awareness, the meaning is basically the same. So this is not true mind. Furthermore, after those external things are extinguished, if it's not true mind, what about my internal, what they call independent, solitary thoughts? There are several types of such thoughts. One is scattered thoughts, and particularly agitated or mad, crazy thoughts, dream thoughts, and meditative discriminating thoughts. These four types of thoughts are actually not true mind. Of course, scattered, mad, and dream states are definitely not, if one hasn't recognized their essence. But some people think when I enter meditation, that should be true mind, right? But in meditative states, it also depends on whether you've recognized your mind's nature. If you haven't recognized mind's nature and just rest like this, that's definitely not true mind. Just now we discussed the internal maintaining inner tranquil solitude. Maintaining inner tranquil solitude means this kind of internal abiding at such times. Actually, you think I am abiding, but very likely a mental object. In Tantra, this is called hidden, latent, discriminating thoughts. On the surface, you can't see them at all, like waves on the ocean, but in one's own mind, one originally feels one is abiding. There are no major discriminating thoughts or distractions, but internally it seems one is perhaps inside there are continuously some stirrings, continuously some arisings. This is called a kind of latent, discriminating thought. Here he also explains that this internally maintained tranquil solitude is actually also shadowy discriminations of mental objects. Then the Buddha told Ananda, I did not command you to grasp it as non-mind. I did not particularly force or compel you to grasp it as non-mind. That what you grasp is not mind. I did not say this. You should not grasp this mind, nor should you grasp non-mind. I did not say this, but you should still carefully observe your own mind attentively to see what it's really like. He said, but regarding your mind, just let you examine your own mind with subtle investigation, subtly investigate, subtly ponder, observe, and analyze. You should still examine carefully, look and reflect on your own mind, what it's really like. The following statement is somewhat difficult to understand. He said, carefully reflect on your own mind. Observe, if separated from past objects, what we discussed before related to the 5 objects, form, sound, scent, taste, touch, these are all called past objects. If separated from these past objects, there is still a discriminating nature. This would be your true mind. This is a hypothetical statement, one aspect of it. There are 2 ways to explain this. This is one way. If you are separated from past objects and still have a discriminating nature, this would be your true mind. Or if this discriminating nature is separated from objects and has no essence, separated from these objects, actually this should mean the same thing. If there is such a discriminating nature that is separated from objects, after being separated from objects, it itself becomes without essence. In this case, these are then shadowy discriminations of past objects. In this case, what is this actually? Shadowy discriminations of past objects. What is the final conclusion? Whether you have a discriminating nature or this discriminating nature is separated from past objects and is without essence, these 2 cases actually have no true past objects, only shadowy discriminations of past objects. But such shadowy discriminations are impermanent like objects, following. Perhaps the punctuation here varies somewhat. If this is the case, objects are not permanent. Whether form objects, form, sound, scent, taste, touch, or dharma dhatu. Here he calls all of these past objects. He doesn't say dharma dhatu or form objects or what kind of objects. He doesn't specify, just such shadowy discriminations of past objects. These past objects are not permanent. If past objects are not permanent, if they change and perish, they will change. When they change, then your mind, because you are established in dependence on this mind. In this case, if past objects don't exist, the mind grasping them also perishes accordingly. In this way, your mind becomes like a turtle's hair or rabbit's horns. If we follow this reasoning, your Dharmakaya would be equivalent to annihilation. The Dharmakaya would not exist either. In this case, who would cultivate the patience of non-arising dharmas? If you say there's a discriminating mind related to past objects to infer with, this way is definitely unreasonable. This is one method of explanation. There's also Chankya's translated Tibetan Tripitaka. His method of segmentation is like this. This might be easier to understand, but it differs somewhat from the Chinese in the middle words. How does he explain it? He says, examine carefully. If separated from past objects, there is still a discriminating nature. This would be your true mind. Because the above is a hypothetical statement, if separated from the preceding impermanence, at this time, separately having another discriminating nature that grasps objects, meaning having such a discriminating nature that grasps objects, a grasping discriminating nature separated from past objects, if this is your true mind, then this discriminating nature, this if character is not particularly appropriate. At this time, this discriminating nature, because it's separated from objects, has already become without essence, is an unreal dharma. Do you understand this reasoning? If separated from past objects, there's separately another discriminating nature that is your true mind, then this discriminating nature, because it's separated from objects, becomes without essence, an unreal dharma. If it's an unreal dharma, then these objects before it become merely reflections, because mind has become an unreal dharma. In this case, these objects before your mind are nothing but reflections, and these reflected objects are also impermanent. Because they're impermanent, they change. Because they change, your mind also becomes like turtle's hair or rabbit's horns, also non-existent. This way, there's the fault of Dharmakaya annihilation. Who cultivates the patience of non-arising dharmas? The Tibetan method of segmentation differs somewhat from the Chinese, but I hope our Dharma friends will also analyze this passage carefully. Some commentaries, like Master Oyi's, divide it into the previous part. If grasping mental objects should be form, sound, scent, taste, touch objects, having a complete nature apart. This places also a paragraph, a method of recognizing mind. Then below, as you are now, up to shadowy discriminations of mental objects, this place is one section. Then below, divided into 2 sections, there's also this method of explanation. But when I look at this explanation, it might be somewhat circuitous. What does it mean? The meaning Perhaps everyone understands, separated from past objects, because here he always thinks whether not grasping form, sound, scent, taste, or grasping form, sound, scent, taste, whatever, can infer and observe. There's a mind. Most of us also think this way. Whatever we can observe, there's a mind that should exist. That day in the Tantric teachings too, if you think you are the observer, what is its essence like? You should observe it. Actually, this method is quite similar, but when analyzing the text literally, we sometimes might be a bit circuitous. Let's see. The method I just described has two hypotheticals. If separated from past objects, having discriminating nature is true mind. If this discriminating nature is separated from objects and has such without essence, then your past objects have nothing besides shadowy discriminations. And these past object reflections are also impermanent, so the reasoning that follows can continue. So this principle should be observed somewhat. Later on, because here when we discuss past object reflections, actually the 6 consciousnesses are already refuted, then the 7th consciousness is also refuted. Master Hanshan and others also always think this way. This method of analysis here not only refutes the 6 consciousnesses, but also refutes the 7th consciousness. In this way, it also indirectly refutes the heretical permanent autonomous self, permanent particles, permanent creators of all. These are also naturally refuted. Whatever is related to your mind, refuted through a method of refuting objects. Actually, in the Abhisamayalankara and Madhyamaka, there's a method of analysis. If objects are not established, subjects are not established. If subjects are not established, objects are not established. This method can also refute, or because external objects don't exist, faculties don't exist, and the middle also doesn't exist. This previous method of analysis is quite similar to the Bodhikaryavattara's method. Refuting this way is completely feasible. So here, when refuting in one's own practice process, there are some clear minds. In our practice process, we often speak of a clear mind, but this clear mind, when we recognize it, should we recognize it as impermanent? But recognizing it as impermanent is actually not very ultimate. What should we recognize? Recognize its true nature. Its true nature is actually non-arising and non-ceasing. This point in our tantric teachings, what is explained is completely the same. Some principles taught by His Holiness Guru Rinpoche before, when I taught Tantra, I also explained. We might now think we have a kind of clear essence. Of course, following our own physical body and the bondage of discriminating thoughts, we now don't completely recognize the state of non-arising and non-ceasing. But if we awaken to its essence, we should say we've understood from the texts. So in this context, when you truly recognize it, if the referent object is an unconditioned Dharma, how could our referent subject, how could an impermanent mind recognize it? There might be such doubts, but at this time, no need to doubt. Why? When you truly recognize the permanent or original face, at this time, like space directly on space's essence, all 5 aggregates, however they arise or cease, don't affect space itself. So in our process of recognition, when we should realize this luminosity of our own mind, although it appears to have arising and ceasing, actually it has already merged with the state of non-arising and non-ceasing. We should understand it this way. This is also another way to attain the patience of non-arising dharmas. This passage is somewhat challenging. Below it becomes easier to understand. This passage, I hope when you take the exam later, you can also offer it as dharma. Today, at this time, Ananda and the Great Assembly fell silent in bewilderment, because the Buddha taught something especially profound, that impermanent mind is not true mind, permanent mind is true mind. After this principle, all the Great Assembly and Ananda could be said to have nothing to say. Everyone was very amazed. In Tibetan, it says, on one hand, they were silent. On the other hand, they felt it was very rare, because he taught especially profoundly. These noble ones, after he finished teaching, immediately understood, not like us sometimes. After being taught many times, we become more confused. There's also this. These noble ones felt very amazed, felt bewildered. Here, bewildered has other meanings in Chinese according to its literal meaning, but in Tibetan they translate it as silence and feeling it was rare. Then the Buddha told Ananda, all worldly practitioners, although they manifest these attainments, the 9 sequential concentrations, 9 sequential, our first dhyana, second dhyana, third dhyana, fourth dhyana, then the four formless realm concentrations, infinite space, infinite consciousness, nothingness, neither perception nor non-perception, and above this the concentration of cessation of perception and sensation, cessation concentration. These are called the 9 worldly concentrations. Although some people have manifested the 9 concentrations, they haven't attained the elimination of outflows to become arhats. What is the reason? All depend on grasping the delusions of birth and death as real. This is the reason. So you now, although you are the widely learned Venerable Ananda, foremost in extensive learning, you are quite famous, also quite accomplished, but until now you haven't achieved noble fruition because you have always not entered your own mind in concentration and in study, always extensively learning, not doing this, so you haven't attained the arhat fruition of elimination of outflows. Like Zixuan, some commentaries explain that the arhat fruition mentioned here actually refers to Mahayana Bodhisattva fruition, because Mahayana Bodhisattvas, from the first ground of joy to the 7th ground of far going, can all be called arhats. For this reason, he explains here that merely worldly concentrations without recognizing one's own mind cannot possibly eliminate all afflictive obstructions to attain the ground bodhisattva fruition of eliminating all afflictive obstructions, because arhat sometimes, the Buddha is also called arhat drachompa. Arhat actually means surpassing the destructible. Chu means eliminating. Yu huai, yu refers to the world. Huai means destroying these seeds. Surpassing the destructible. Drachompa, yes, this meaning. So here it's explained that Ananda, because the Buddha said, your extensive learning still doesn't achieve noble fruition. Then next, after Ananda heard this, he wept bitterly again and began to cry, because previously it seemed when he encountered the daughter of Matangi and Manjushri Bodhisattva brought him back, he also prostrated at the Buddha's feet and wept sorrowfully, crying very sadly, I encountered adverse conditions outside. Generally we say men don't shed tears lightly, right? Generally, it's not easy. Real men don't easily shed tears. They don't cry. But Ananda has a rather soft heart. In front of the Buddha, it should be fine. He has cried many times before, Ananda has. Ananda cried again and prostrated fully, then began to kneel for a long time with joined palms and addressed the Buddha. Before the Buddha, he prostrated, joined palms, and paid homage again, and began to address the Buddha, saying this, ever since I generated bodhicitta and left home following the Buddha, relying on the Buddha's spiritual power, I have always remained serving the Buddha in the Buddha's presence. I ordained before the Buddha, and I am also the Buddha's relative and also the Buddha's attendant. My appearance is also quite good. Many people like me. In all aspects I am quite capable. I myself also often think, what does he think? I need not practice. I shouldn't need to practice. I don't need to practice. I am the Buddha's attendant. I'm also so good looking. I don't need anything else. Actually, when people have these advantages, there are still problems. For example, if one has wealth in some aspects, or good appearance, or very good lineage, or their source of support is quite good, at such times, naturally, one doesn't know one's own faults. One feels one is great and doesn't need to practice. I thought the Tathagata would grant me samadhi. He thought, in the future, the Tathagata will surely bestow samadhi concentration upon me. I don't need to practice. The Tathagata will just bless me with a whoosh, and then I'll immediately, bam, become enlightened. I don't need any ascetic practices. I'm different from others. But today, I didn't know that body and mind cannot substitute for each other. I lost my original mind. Now I finally know that the Buddha's body and mind cannot represent me. My own body and mind are my own. The Buddha only teaches you the Dharma. Besides this, however much the Buddha may often touch your head, bless you, criticize you, scold you, if you don't practice, the Buddha is the Buddha and Ananda is Ananda. So some of us, whether volunteer workers around teachers or teachers' attendants, many people feel as if they've already achieved realization. But whether the teacher has achieved realization is hard to say. If the teacher has achieved realization, between you and this teacher you've merely formed a virtuous connection. If in our world one could truly receive accomplishment immediately through blessings, I think regarding the Buddha, generally people of the Shakya clan, are especially loving toward their relatives. His Holiness also taught before that the Shakya clan is somewhat different from others, especially regarding their clan and people. They are especially loving in these aspects. The Buddha was also like this. He was especially good to his father and all his clan members, such a person. But regarding transcendental realization, even being the Buddha's relative and the Buddha's attendant, finally Ananda clearly knew, oh, I originally thought the Buddha and I have a very good relationship and should give me special treatment. But now it appears the Buddha is the Buddha and I am I. His body and mind cannot represent me. So today, I finally know that I've never recognized my own mind. I hate myself. For so many years, every day I've been serving tea and cooking for the Buddha. Sorry, there wasn't serving tea and cooking. Tibetan people generally have serving tea and cooking, so one still needs to practice, right? Then he said, I lost it. I didn't recognize my original mind and also didn't practice. Although physically ordained, my mind hasn't entered the path. Ananda still represents many of us. Our bodies have already been ordained. We ordained when young. We've always been following the Buddha, but our minds haven't entered the path, especially recently encountering various situations. Only then did he realize his mind hadn't entered the path. Like a poor son who abandons his father and flees, like a very poor son whose father is originally very wealthy, but who has already abandoned this father and fled to other places. Such a person is truly pitiable. The meaning here is that one has abandoned one's true mind. On one hand, there's this meaning. On the other hand, it also directly shows that although in the Buddha's presence I haven't practiced well, it's like a poor son who abandons his father with especially great wealth and experiences suffering in other places. Today I finally know that although one has extensive learning, if one doesn't practice, it's equal to not hearing. Today I understand very, very clearly that although some people are extremely learned, if they don't practice, it seems that besides the merit of hearing the Dharma, everything else is basically the same as not having heard it. Previously in the Avatamsaka Sutra, it also says, like a poor person who day and night counts others' treasures but has not half a penny's share, extensive learning is also like this. Before this, extensive learning is also like this appears several times. There it's also like this, like a poor person who every day counts others' jewels but has no authority over even half a penny. Our extensive learning is also like this. We can speak eloquently, but if we ourselves don't practice, it's completely like this. Like a person describing food, they can never be satiated. They speak about it extensively. But if you only speak and don't eat, you can't possibly be full. This is also the same. Recently here at Larung, after a while there will also be retreat. If everyone has time and no special circumstances, it would indeed be good to earnestly recite Amitabha Buddha, make aspirations earnestly, and earnestly observe your own mind. This is indeed very important. Our human life is also impermanent. I heard that the Dharma friends here still attach importance to this. Now they're also making preparations in all aspects. I heard that food in many shops has already been sold out. They're always very concerned about this. Of course, buying lots of food is also important, but mainly retreat is not for eating. If you eat constantly for 15 days, when it's time to come out, even getting out the door will be difficult. This isn't very good. You'd better not eat too much. Mainly practice more and study more. This would be better. Our place for practice. Regarding this place for practice, I personally think that including these past few years, some practice venues we've created for practitioners should be very good, but some Dharma friends still feel they're a bit small. This and that complaints. Actually, for a true practitioner, as you also know, the abbots of Han monasteries originally, Fang Zhang is now it seems to have become a job title, but originally it was a square with 4 sides, all one zhang, about 3.3 meters each. In that case, a place for a monastic's true conduct, for entering concentration, for meditation. So some of us, especially in places like this, everyone shouldn't hope that your house should be very big with all sorts of messy things piled inside. That's uncomfortable. As practitioners, it should be rather simple. Like before, I've been to places like Jigme Lingpa's cave, including King Trisong Detsen and Guru Rinpoche's. There's now a king's cave at Sami Chimfu, very, very small. If one of us were to sleep there, our feet might stick outside the cave. Longchenpa's cave at Gangri Tokar, the cave in that place is also very small, so everyone shouldn't have especially high requirements. I think houses don't need to be especially big. Then keep them very clean, and the decorations or arrangements inside don't need to be especially luxurious. Something simple would be better. There's including when Xuanzang went to India, some people now say his retreat room at that time was also rather small. Previously, when we looked at the Vimalakirti Sutra, Vimalakirti's retreat room was also rather small. Let's look at an introduction to Xuanzang's retreat room.
那兰陀虽然也是寺院，但更是大学。玄奘就是其中最著名的中国留学生。目前印度的许多古迹的确定理由之一，便是玄奘书的记载。我们来到了他那时的宿舍，他的房间不大，墙角有个洞，可容一人打坐。据说这是他的闭关之地。
这是玄奘法师的地方，他和其他的教授的待遇是一样的，房间也是单独的。他还有一个闭关的一个，里面刚好坐一个人闭关，旁系打坐可以闭关的一个地方。所以这个是个历史的遗迹。虽然这个地方很小，对中国文化和印度文化的影响非常之大。考证也是这样的，根据他的《大唐西域记》中间的很多记载，才发现这个地方考证的。他是一个划时代的一个伟大的僧人，我们也学习一学。
It seems the Chinese he speaks is like what we Tibetans speak. That's fine. Below this is, just now we said practice is very important, so all of us should still, if we have various favorable conditions, well, practice even a little bit. This is also very important. Below it says, World-honored one, we now are bound by afflictive obstructions and knowledge obstructions. Mainly, we don't know the nature of mind that is tranquil and permanent. Therefore, the Tathagata should have compassion, have pity for us who are destitute. Destitute in Tibetan means beings without support or refuge, or those especially poor in virtues who haven't realized the true nature, like being naked, these pitiful people. At that time, Ananda felt his practice was poor. Because we haven't recognized our own mind, the Buddha must care for us who are without support, especially pitiful, poor, and destitute. Then grant us the subtle and wondrous clear mind. Open our Dharma eye and open our vision for the path of practice. Praying like this, when praying like this, because without recognizing the essence of mind, much is futile and meaningless. As it also says in the Bodhikariyavatara, if one doesn't know this mind, the supreme among profound dharmas, seeking happiness or avoiding suffering will be meaningless wandering. What's said here is also the same. If we don't understand this, we're especially pitiable. Therefore, the Buddha must teach us the true Dharma. At this time, the Tathagata, from the swastika symbol on his chest, the Buddha has such a symbol on his chest, what we call an auspicious knot, one of the 8 auspicious symbols. From this swastika on his chest emanated precious light, immeasurable radiance of jewels. Moreover, this light was brilliant, extremely bright and dazzling, as discussed yesterday. It had hundreds of thousands of different colors, hundreds of thousands of different hues. Then it extended to the 10 directions, to Buddha worlds numerous as particles of dust. At the same time, it pervaded everything completely. The Buddha's light, here it's light from his chest. Previously there was light from his face, and above there was light from the crown of his head. Some commentaries say that in the Shurangama Sutra, the Buddha emitted 5 different lights. So far, 3 types of light have been discussed. In total, he emitted light 5 times, emanating 5 different lights. So far, 3 emanations of light have been discussed. This light had already irrigated all the precious lands of the 10 directions. It irrigated or pervaded all the precious lands of the 10 directions. Then this light continuously illuminated up to the Tathagata's crown. Finally, it continuously circled to Ananda and other beings. The Buddha's light continuously illuminated all beings, including Ananda. Other beings were also touched by it. At this time, the Buddha told Ananda, saying thus, Today I establish for you the great Dharma banner, because Ananda had always wanted to attain the Dharma but hadn't received the true instructions. The Buddha had been continuously guiding him, and now the Buddha was truly going to give him. Of course, there are still many questions later, but now, as the first step, he would establish for him a true Dharma banner. The Dharma banner here should be the inner Dharma banner, establishing the Dharma banner. This means, today I also help you attain the Dharma banner and enable all beings of the 10 directions to also obtain the subtle, extremely profound, secret Dharma of seeing one's nature and clear mind, the naturally pure, luminous mind, the Dharma of this luminous heart. Let these beings purify their Dharma I, because when the Buddha proclaimed the Dharma in this way, Ananda also attained the supremely excellent state of patience with non-arising Dharmas. Other beings also attained the state of profound, vast, playless, luminous, unconditioned Dharmas, such a state. They purified their wisdom I and attained supremely excellent fruition. So our discussion of this emanation of light has reached this point. The content that follows we can continue studying next year. If impermanence doesn't occur, everyone, next year around February or March, we will continuously teach the latter part of the Shurangama Sutra. I hope all our listeners, not one missing, will all listen at that time. Probably after mid-February, if there are classes, half a month or about a week in advance, we can also notify everyone. Because right now, the specific time, I can't determine it either. I also have some translation work in between. What were some practitioners in Tibet like before? Some practitioners in Tibetan region would retreat in winter. In summer and autumn, in summer they would go to nomadic areas to request some butter and dried cheese, going for alms. Then in autumn they would go to farming areas. Then in winter and spring they could retreat for a while, because for the next year, previously their living expenses still required going everywhere for alms. Previously, many in our Tibet were said to be like this. So I am also like this. Sometimes in winter, if I have a little time, I translate some portions. The second year, some need to be taught. One is that I myself also need to do some translation. Then when there's opportunity, I also go out to communicate and exchange with people of different levels. Today I saw something, when I was in Switzerland, someone asked me about Madhyamaka dependent origination. Then I answered him. Then the translator, it seemed to be French or German, said, "Please speak more slowly. Too fast, I can't understand." Then I said, "It's already lunchtime. What's fast about it? There's no time now. My stomach will be hungry soon." So sometimes I might have similar exchanges at that time. Sometimes there's not enough time. There are such situations too. So going out for some communication and exchange, time is also quite tight now. Plus, regarding my own body, there are problems everywhere. So sometimes there's also a need, whether domestically or abroad, if necessary, for repairs and maintenance, because this broken car has been used for some time. But I don't know whether it can still be used or not. If it can be used, I'll continue using it. If not, then I can also replace it when the time comes. Regardless, sometimes I might also need to go repair and maintain this broken car. Other than that, there probably won't be many things. Mainly, I also hope that if all our conditions are favorable, everyone should strive to listen to the latter part of the Shurangama Sutra to completion. As a teacher, I also generate the greatest aspiration, but whether it can be accomplished, worldly affairs are also impermanent, everything changes, so it's hard to say. Regardless, His Holiness Guru Rinpoche also said before that we make many preparations for worldly dharmas. Perhaps it's unnecessary. As practitioners, worldly people, of course, have worldly ideals. Regarding transcendental and liberation aspects, one also needs to be prepared. So I am also like this. Regarding this Shurangama Sutra, we must make aspirations to complete its teaching. I also have such aspiration. So today I'm also especially grateful. Although from the beginning of the Shurangama Sutra until now, there have been only a dozen or so classes, not particularly many, but during this process, many volunteer workers, whether translators or those who help us spread, various technical personnel. More importantly, I especially thank you, listeners. If there weren't a single listener, we wouldn't be able to teach to others. Teaching to oneself, sometimes that's also not good to do. Moreover, having so many people consistently from the beginning until now, always very earnest, not only listening earnestly, but also with very good expressions. When encountering the 7 investigations of mind, there was slightly a somewhat dejected posture, but during tutorials it was still quite good. So throughout the entire process, everyone has shown a kind of enthusiasm for the Dharma, a kind of yearning for the Dharma. This point, as an individual, as a teacher, has been very moving to me. If everyone had no interest and no confidence, it seems my enthusiasm might also decline accordingly. So throughout our entire process, whether on the mountain or below the mountain, in the heavens or below the heavens, all these beings connected to the Shurangama Sutra are still very good. Because I think this way, in our Han region, although the Shurangama Sutra is extremely, extremely famous, if we don't study it like this, indeed, relying only on reading, one might not necessarily understand it. Without someone to explain the Buddha's teachings, even the wise cannot understand. Just as the Avatamsaka Sutra explains, if no one explains the Buddha's teachings, they're very difficult to understand. Now here with us, everyone studying together like this, if you don't study like this and just read it yourself, I've encountered many people before who said, I've read the Shurangama Sutra. Just reading it has merit, but much of the content within might not necessarily be known. So when we study this time, we also have many, especially wise people here. When encountering these questions, they still need to think. How much more so for people who previously had no Buddhist foundation? Reading it once might not lead to understanding. So our study this time is very necessary. Without hearing, contemplating, and practicing the Dharma, without doing it properly like this, if you just look at it and tell others about it, that's fine. But the truly profound meaning of Buddhism is very difficult to understand. So here as well, all of us studying together should be, within our lifetime, very meaningful and very joyful. This year's Shurangama Sutra course can also be considered complete, coming to a conclusion. The merit of what we've taught this year, because in the first half of the year we also taught some of the Vimalakirti Sutra. In the second half, starting from the Shurangama Sutra until now, it can also be considered quite successful. In all aspects, no adverse conditions appeared. This point should make everyone very joyful. Next, we dedicate this merit to all sentient beings.
Bandara